Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. In our first story, we'll tell about revenge on the woman who decided to cheat our OP for money and on top of that, put him in jail. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Throw me in jail just for yelling at you so you can extort money from me? Okay. I was married to a woman in the Dominican Republic who got together with an official and had me arrested on trumped-up charges for the purpose of getting half my money in a settlement. I spent 3 months in prison there and lost 20 pounds. You can't cancel a green card, but I figured out a way to get her to do it herself. I pretended like I was going to help my ex. I sent her the correct form for extending her residency from conditional to 10 years with the parts for divorce filled out. She went and submitted that right away. However, I knew that the INS would demand the divorce papers with a 30-day deadline. If she doesn't meet the deadline, she'll lose her residency because it's still conditional. I know that the divorce papers will not be out in time for her to meet the deadline. She went to the USA before that could happen. At the last court hearing, her lawyer said she'd gone. In 2 or 3 months, she will be illegal and I can have her put on the deportation list. And our second story, in which I shut down the mall. This one comes from a number of years ago when I worked security for the most popular mall in the area. It was the mall of choice for college students, suburbanites, and mall walkers alike. At the time, it had 6 major retailers, 5 with 2 floors, a full gym, and about 50 stores, besides not counting the food court and kiosks. Now, this day fell on a Friday that began one of the worst winter storms the state had seen in decades. It was so bad that the city nearby declared a state of emergency. Anyone caught driving without a valid reason was given a ticket. Every cop car had a tow truck behind it, and in front of every cop car was a plow truck. Driving home after my shift, I spun out on the ice going 30 miles per hour. The road was 100% straight and flat. It was really bad. The people's safety was at stake. Now, as anyone in the business knows, malls have contracts with their stores on how long to stay open for, and if they're not open during these hours, they can be fined. So me, working the closing evening shift before the night guy came at 11 p.m., had a ton of people asking if they could close early, even before the storm hit. It was maybe 2 p.m. at this point. I, of course, radio the head of security asking him about it. He relays back that mall management, who've already gone home for the day, have decided to see how bad it gets before making a decision. Now the director's shift ends at 2 p.m., but he decided to stick around to see how things went. The sergeant was also on duty until 7 p.m., so it was the 3 of us. I think someone had called in sick that night, but I can't remember. As time went on, the mall became more and more deserted. The director became more and more concerned. He was a true man of integrity, absolutely concerned and dedicated to the safety of the mall and its tenants. That mall management wouldn't take heed to his concerned tone over the safety of the mall, and the fact that it was pretty much deserted of anyone who would care if a store was open left him pretty depressed. He finally left at 4 p.m., with the word from management being the following: if anyone asks you, you can tell them, yes, they can close early, but don't go around telling everyone. It was total bullcrap. The rain was turning into snow, and the weather had the temperature falling to 10 degrees in the span of 10 hours. With that, the director hung his head and left. The sergeant, feeling useless as well, went to do paperwork he needed to get done, leaving the mall to me to hold down my empty, ice-covered fortress. I, however, had different plans. I began walking the mall, stopping at every single store. If the manager wasn't already at the entrance waiting for me to come by, I would ask for them. The exchanges would look something like this. Me: ask me if you can close early and go home. Manager with a confused look: why? Me in a flat tone: just do it. Manager even more confused: can we close early? Me: yes, you can. Manager absolutely questioning what reality he was living in: why did you have me ask you? Me as I begin to walk away: my orders from mall management are not to tell anyone unless they ask me. Without fail, their faces would contort, trying to make sense of what I'd just said, and furthermore, what I left implied. And within 20 minutes, every single shop in the entire mall was closed, so I locked up the entrances, cleared out any wandering patrons, and retired to the dugout. The sergeant left not too much longer, without any words shared. The tension and stress said enough. I moved my car right next to the service entrance for the office. I spent an hour and a half digging myself out once my shift came to close. The rest of the story. Well, prior to this meeting, a number of still confused store managers talked to the director during his morning rounds. I'm told he laughed pretty hard and was greatly relieved that I'd found a loophole. So when mall management tried to call him out, he was able to, with a mostly straight face, relay to them that we indeed only told people they could close when they asked. Thing was, I went around telling everyone to ask me. And our last story. Duplex destruction. A little over a year ago, I moved to a smallish town. I found a decent duplex out on the outskirts, plenty of room for just myself. When I spoke to the landlord, or landlady, I guessed, she had implied that she'd had quite a few other people look at the place, but that these weren't the sort of people she wanted moving in. It was heavily implied, though never explicitly stated, that she wouldn't allow minorities to move into her duplexes. I really didn't care, as it was none of my business, and as long as I could get the place, I was happy. So I moved in a week later, and at first all was well. I work Tuesday through Saturday, 8 to 5, every week, though I frequently get off later than 5. My job consists of driving a company truck and going to customers' houses to fix their stuff. I sometimes deal with as many as 10 different people a day. At the end of the day, the only thing I usually want to do is go home and veg out in front of my computer. The last thing I want to do is interact with other people or have to deal with a bunch of noise. Unfortunately, my neighbor was running her own daycare next door, watching as many as 10 or 12 kids in her little 1,000-square-foot unit. She would allow these kids to run wild. My typical Monday, which was one of my weekend days, would consist of waking up at about 7 a.m. to the sounds of kids banging on walls and jumping on furniture, and hearing my neighbor scream at the top of her lungs. This would go on all day until about 7 p.m. with no respite. Now, I knew that when I moved in, she ran her own small daycare, but I didn't think it would be a problem. After all, I used to watch kids as well, only I was good at it. I made sure the kids I watched were well behaved. Naturally, I assumed that someone running their own daycare would have the skill to control the kids. Not so. After a few weeks of this, I ended up losing my patience. I knocked on my neighbor's door and engaged her in small talk. I didn't want to immediately tell her to shut the F up, so I just made it seem like a friendly chat. During the small talk, I realized this bee was nuts. I quickly forgot her name, but I always refer to her by the nickname I gave her, Marty Bum. Well, after a few minutes of conversation with Marty Bum, I decided to broach the subject of excessive noise. I started out by asking her if I was noisy and assuring her that if I ever became noisy, she could ask me and I would quiet down. She assured me that she never heard a peep from me. She then asked me if she was noisy, to which I replied, there was an awful lot of noise during the day while she was watching kids. Now, I'm still trying to keep things civil and friendly, but things start going off the rails. She apologizes and tells me that running a daycare is a noisy business. She explains that this is her only source of income, and she has no choice in the matter. I ask her if she's able to keep the kids from banging on the walls at the very least, to which she replies that she's one person with 10 kids, and she can't be everywhere at once. At this point, I realize that being Mr. Nice Guy isn't working. This filthy bee is just going to keep making excuses and avoiding the issue rather than actually trying to do something about it. I suggest that she either hire on some help or take some lessons to learn to better deal with young children. She suggests I move elsewhere and that it was stupid to move in when I knew next door was a daycare. Well, at this point, I'm just PO'd. This bee does a crappy job of running a daycare and handling children and has the nerve to call me stupid? I decide to go to war. Before going back into my own unit, I make one more statement. Do you have a license to run a daycare? Well, it turns out that Marty Bum is good friends with the landlady, and at the beginning of next month, when landlady comes to collect rent, she serves me an eviction notice, giving me 30 days to leave. Her explanation is that I'm causing tensions among the other tenants and being a troublemaker. Keep in mind, the only other tenant I've spoken with has been Marty Bum. Well, neither of these bees know who they're effing with. I'm the last person to just roll over and take it in the butt, especially when I feel that something unjust has been done. I do my research and learn about my state's child care laws. I learned that there's a limit to how many children an unlicensed facility can care for, which is also based on how many caregivers there are. I also learned that there are certain requirements, such as state workers inspecting the facilities and doing background checks on the caregivers. All of that licensing information is public domain, so I do a search, and sure enough, my neighbor is unlicensed and illegally watching children. After that, I do some research on housing equality laws in my state. Turns out it's illegal for anyone, even a private owner, to discriminate against potential tenants on things like race, sex, religion, etc. First things first, I call up the Department of Child Protective Services and report my neighbor. I explain that she's unlicensed, that she's clearly unable to handle the children she's watching, and that I frequently hear banging and yelling coming from her unit, which has me concerned for the safety and well-being of the children. Bit of a fib right there, but I figured I should spice it up a bit. Well, much to my surprise, it only takes about an hour before 2 CPS agents and a couple of police are pulling up in front of the duplex. They force Marty Bum to call each of the parents to come pick up their children, then explain to the parents that if something were to happen to their children, that they could be held liable for leaving their children with someone who isn't equipped to handle them. Marty Bum ends up getting slapped with a hefty fine and an order to appear in court. For the first time since I moved into that duplex, I was happy for the thin walls. I just sat there drinking a few beers and listening to all the chaos. It went on for hours. I slept like a baby that night. So phase 1 of Operation Duplex Destruction was complete. Marty Bum was ruined. I destroyed her only source of income permanently, caused her financial distress in the form of a fine, and got her in trouble with the law. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.